You all can see the intro slide, okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, I'll start letting people in. Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute.
Oh,
Awesome. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started then. Hi, everyone. I am Nisha Udine, founder of Brown Girls Health. Thank you so much for joining us today for this really important discussion and our very first community chat. I started this community in hopes to break the silence on South Asian women's health and raise awareness for the barriers that impact this community. There's so many topics that are often stigmatized, and I believe the first step is combating that is to talk about it. Tonight's conversation will touch on some of those barriers, and we'll have an open conversation about mental health, which is often stigmatized in South Asian communities. It's time to shine a light on these topics and get real about our experiences, especially in honor of Mental Health Month and AAPI Month. We have an amazing panel of experts who will guide us through these topics, sharing their insights and personal experiences. And since this is a community chat, we want to hear from all of you too. So following our Q&A with our panelists, there will be a chance to ask questions, and we'll ask you to put that in the chat box when it's time. This is a safe space where we can all learn from each other and make a real difference. Without further ado, I'll pass it on to Neha Darji, who will be our amazing moderator this evening and will guide an impactful conversation with our panelists. Thanks, everyone. I think you might be on mute, Neha.
Sorry, just caught that one. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for taking the time to join us for a first community mental health chat with Brown Girls Health. My name is Neha Darji, and I'm the founder and clinical therapist at We Rise Therapy and Wellness. We're a New Jersey-based group mental health practice focused on serving BIPOC women of color, primarily focusing on South Asian women's issues. I founded the practice in 2019 when I saw that there was a need for culturally sensitive and inclusive mental health services for South Asians in the tri-state area after moving to the area, and that the stigma and lack of accessibility and knowledge was the biggest barrier. In creating this practice, we provide individual therapy in addition to education, supervision, training, and workshops in the community on BIPOC and South Asian mental health. I'm really excited that Nisha reached out to me to moderate this event, as South Asian mental health is near and dear to my heart, and I'm looking forward to a rich and engaging dialogue this evening. We have some amazing and inspiring panelists doing some very important work, and looking forward to getting to know them. So without further ado, I'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves, and then we will move forward with the panelist portion of the event. I will pass it on to Vidya Nair, who is a therapist, to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I just want to say that it's a total honor to be here with our fellow South Asian brown girls. And a big shout out to Nishat for organizing this. To talk about me, my journey, I started as a social worker working in Department of Children and Families in Florida, just doing a lot of trauma heavy work. And I realized there's a whole conversation that's missing in South Asian communities about trauma and the intergenerational work that needs to go in. And my work has been primarily with adolescents and teens. And I always ask them, are you going to pass on your trauma cycle, or are you going to be a cycle breaker? So essentially, that's my whole caption and my practice with the South Asian women and children.
Thank you, Vidya, for sharing. I will pass it on to Nisha Desai, who is the founder of Anis Health, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I want to echo what Vidya said. I'm so excited to be here today alongside some of these really awesome women. And I'll give you a little bit of background on myself to kick things off. I'm a second generation Indian American. I was born and raised in Florida. My entire family, as a lot of South Asians, are doctors. They're all clinicians. And I was the one person in my family that was like, nah, I don't want to go down that route. I totally see the value in it. But for me, I was always interested in business. And I was also really interested in making a system-wide impact on the healthcare system, which I had seen so closely my whole life growing up. But I just found that there were so many challenges, and it just felt like a very broken system that required innovation. So I went to Penn for my undergrad, where I studied in the Wharton School. I studied finance, marketing, and legal studies. But I can explain a little bit later. My passion has always been in this space of behavioral health. So I kind of went into the industry intersection of healthcare and business as what I want to do with the rest of my career. And initially I was an investor focusing on behavioral health care delivery and health tech. And that really helped me understand the landscape really well, understand a lot of the challenges that entrepreneurs face and a lot of the challenges that require innovative solutions. But I found myself being way more excited every day about the healthcare side of my job than the finance side. So I eventually pivoted. I worked as a product manager for a couple of years at Humana, which is a healthcare payer, where I was building virtual care solutions and apps. And I ultimately went to business school at Harvard Business School to become an entrepreneur in the space. And that's where I met my co-founder, who I believe is also in the room, Alice. And that's where we decided to start Anis, which is a culturally responsive digital mental health platform for the Asian American community. And yeah, I'll explain more later about like why we started it, but for now, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Nisha. We're really excited that you're joining and looking forward to really learning more about your experience in building Anis. And I'll be passing it on to Mrinal Gogale, who will be our final panelist for the evening. Is Mrinal on the call?
Yes, hi. I'm going to leave my video off for now because I did get stuck in traffic for a bit. So yes, hi, I'm Mrinal Gogale. I started out in marketing, communications, and freelance journalism. And right now I work as a business analyst during the day. And I also became an author in 2021. My first book was about South Asian mental health. It's an anthology of multiple true stories about relating to South Asian people living in the West who have had mental health journeys, and it touches on topics like the stigma in our culture and accessibility of healthcare and different issues or how different mental health challenges are experienced in the Desi community. And I am currently in the middle of writing a second one, hopefully published by July 2023.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mrinal. Looking forward to chatting with you as well. I think we can move forward with the panelist portion of the event. So each panelist will have a set of questions that we'll be asking them and some time to respond and get to know them. And then towards the end of the event, as Nishat had mentioned earlier, we will have time for open discussion where you'll be able to ask questions to the specific panelists if you'd like, or any general questions any of the panelists can answer. So we'll get started with Vidya. Vidya, thank you for sharing a little bit about your background in becoming a South Asian therapist and what really drove you to practice in the community. As I think it was really relatable already about breaking cycles, right? And encouraging clients to really think about what that means and what that even looks like, which can come with a lot and is a big journey in healing itself. I'd like to ask, as a therapist who works primarily with adolescents, what do you feel are the biggest challenges you see in regards to their mental health and well-being?
I think there are like two ways of looking at it, like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. I think now that when we look at mental health, we have to talk about pandemic, and there's no way we can have this conversation without bringing that into picture. I primarily see adolescents and teens, and they're always on the screen. So I think that's like the biggest impact that I see right now in mental health, where the human interactions are mostly like based on social media, which I am all about it. But what happens is the human interaction piece is taken away. And a lot of them, I actually see that they're in a bit of a delusional world where they are a bit distant from reality. And that has been a post-pandemic feature that I'm seeing. And I'm seeing all the whole set of disorders that we talk about, mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, just school refusal. And in the South Asian community, I do have some teens and adolescents who actually are dealing with a lot of stigma related to their gender identity and sexual identity. And where we come in as professionals is to just have these conversations and normalize it, just using my own identity, because most of these children in South Asian communities, they don't have a brown lady in their mid-30s having these conversations. So essentially by doing what we all do, we are normalizing it, maybe possibly at a dining table conversation, or maybe at a party, at a Desi event, to talk about who's your partner rather than going, oh, where's the husband? So these are some of the overarching challenges and conversations and things that I'm seeing in adolescents and young adults.
Yeah, definitely. And I can see that I think in the audience today, there might be a variety of people from different backgrounds. They might be professionals, they might be parents, and be advocates. What do you feel that, whatever role that they're in, and because you primarily work with adolescents, whatever role that they're playing in these adolescents' lives, as you know, like from day to day, we might be interacting with adolescents or children and in various roles. How do you feel that family and community members can support adolescents and children that might be showing some signs of mental health issues, whether that's depression, anxiety, inattention issues at school, like identity issues? What are some ways that we can support our kids?
So the first, I guess, a step is to understand that you cannot snap out of it, and it's not for attention. Children don't do it just because they think it's cool. School refusal is not always about being lazy. So just take away all that stigma and these certain words that are associated with mental health challenges. We need to break that down into what that means. Lazy is what? Lack of energy. That's also a symptom of depression. So, and clinically, we need to bring that evidence-based practices in front of parents who can actually look at it and go, oh, maybe it's more than being lazy. And so how do they show up? To answer your question, Neha, the best thing is, first of all, be non-judgmental and provide a safe space. A home or the dining table or just in the kitchen, wherever you are, that should be a safe space for a child to process their day. What does that mean? So what happened in school today? Oh, someone said this. It could be something racist, something based on gender identity. Whatever that is, they should be able to come back and process that with the guardian or the parent. not everyone has the idealistic time and space for this. Everyone's busy, but then every day, if you have like 5 or 10 minutes, part of your schedule, since we schedule everything now, put that part of your schedule to just do a quick check-in and make sure that's a safe space. No consequence. It's a safe space for you to talk about, for the child to talk about what happened through the day. And I think that unconditionally showing up for your child is priceless. And time is the most valuable gift you can give your child. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's inspiring to see that might be part of, breaking the cycle now that, if the parent or the family member or an older person can really provide that space and validate the adolescent or the child, and even just let them know that it's normal, right? And not make it about the parent that they're doing something wrong, or they need to be fixed, or that they need to work harder, or they need to get over it, right? So that's a big part of that. Thank you for sharing. In terms of working with, so as we're talking about breaking generational cycles, can you tell us and expand a little bit more on what that looks like and what that means, like breaking generational cycles and specifically intergenerational trauma that might be presenting when you're working?
I'll try to keep it really small, short.
I know that's heavy. It's a big topic, but
it's a big topic, and that's the topic that it's my passion project. So here we go. So just to give everyone an idea of what, just in case if you don't know what we're talking about, what is intergenerational trauma? So if you were to look at grandparents or great grandparents, what kind of trauma did they have? So in the South Asian community, you can think of there was liberation of Bangladesh, and then there was separation between India and Pakistan. And there were a lot of things that happened during that time. And there was extreme poverty, neglect, and emotional abuse at that time. So that could have been, and always when you pass on the cycle, it's not intentionally. It could have been passed on to the next generation, and how it may have shown up, say for my parents, could have been as something else where they're not emotionally available. Detached parenting style, attachment styles are sometimes very distant, and substance abuse, emotional abuse, domestic violence, it could have been from that generation. And then what happens is the next generation comes along, the millennials and the Gen Zs, and they're dealing with attachment issues where they feel like, what is my identity in the middle of all this? And this constant pressure to live up to, I use this term, am I brown enough? Am I brown enough? Am I desi? Am I this? Am I that? And am I whitewashed? Who made up these things? And they're just confused in all of that cycle. So my work comes in understanding what that meant in each family. What I just gave you is a very generalized view of how it could have presented in a South Asian family. But it could be different and different. It could be high performance oriented families. That's what I see a lot here, where it's all based on performance, and adolescents feel like they are never good enough, no matter what they do. Something like what Nisha was saying, everyone has, the entire family is full of doctors and engineers. How can you top that? And that pressure, the child might look extremely functional, but internally the struggle it's just sad and disheartening to see. And that's the work.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, right? But yeah, I think that's when you touched on looking at like it from a systemic perspective can really help to understand it, right? Like it's larger than just the child, right? And if we can all kind of approach it in a way that we're aware and we work together on helping break these cycles, stop it from being passed on. And Vidya, our last question for you is, so coming from a therapist perspective, how can therapists better understand and address the specific needs of South Asian patients, just as a general?
I just wanted to share an experience of what I had in the Department of Children and Families here, and that's when I started this journey. So I think it's relevant to share that. I was working with this family, and I'm the only brown therapist in the group. And they were saying that they were thinking of removing the child from the family. And it's a South Asian family. And they were saying the mom was hand feeding the child. And they felt like the mom was not emotionally equipped to take care of the child, because they diagnosed her with postpartum depression. Which was really interesting. And I was not visiting the family when I heard it, and because I'm so Desi at heart, I was like, what did you just say? The mom is feeding the child with a hand. So it's that cultural perspective that is missing. And you cannot all be, culturally informed, but we can all bring in some cultural humility into practice. I work with Hispanic families and Black families, and we cannot go in assuming that we're culturally informed. And that's where I think as South Asian therapists or BIPOC communities that we work with, we just need to be aware that we might know something, but we might not know it all. And we just need to go meet the client where they are and then try to have them explain what that means to them, what their culture means to them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Vidya, for your insights. And I know we'll have questions at the end, but just to kind of wrap it up, is there a way that clients that might be interested in working with you in Florida, or therapists or professionals that might want to connect with you? We'll be sharing that towards the end, but is there any other information you'd like to provide?
You can follow me on my Instagram, or you can just look up Vidya Nair therapist and I should pop up somewhere.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then our next panelist this evening, we're introducing Nisha Desai. Nisha, can you tell us a little bit about your platform, Anise Health, and what it is and how did it come to be?
Yeah, I'm happy to explain what Anise does, but I think the best way to explain it is sharing a little bit about why we decided to start it, and sharing a little bit more about the problem that we saw in the market, which, by the way, Vidya, everything you described, I resonate with so strongly. So yeah, growing up as a second-gen South Asian in a very traditional South Asian household meant that my parents often, never talked about mental health, and I was the emotional one in my family. So I was viewed as weak. And unfortunately, my parents often told me, to just toughen up and get over it whenever I came to them with something that I was struggling with. And, not to say I don't love my parents, they're great parents, but this concept of mental health was not something I was familiar with until college. And I was really, really hesitant to seek help because of that stigma or that taboo that was placed on the topic. In college, when I finally started to come around to the idea of seeking support for some of the issues I was going through, I was faced with a pretty poor and broken system in front of me. The college counseling center was always backed up. There were never appointments available. And when I finally did get an appointment, it was the worst experience ever. It was, very, very, to Vidya's point, there were a lot of assumptions being made. It's very one size fits all. And I felt really disrespected and misunderstood by the provider that I was speaking to. So I just quit. I never, went forward with another session at that point. And unfortunately, what I saw around me was a lot of other people going through the same thing. At my college campus, there were 14 suicides during the time that I was in college and the 2 years after. And almost every single one of those people were people of color. And almost all of those people of color were Asian. So as you can imagine, as an impressionable 20-year-old, I was really deeply impacted by this. And I noticed that a lot of these individuals were likely going through similar things as me, where for a long time they let their mental illness go untreated. And then when they finally potentially tried to seek help, they were faced with a system that didn't really have effective treatments that were built for them. So ever since then, like I mentioned, my career has been at this intersection, and one of the things that I got a chance to work on while I was a product manager was a text-based therapy app that we were building alongside Talkspace. Talkspace, as many of you guys might know, is like a big digital mental health player that kind of like pioneered text-based therapy, and their value prop is really focused on like access and improving like the convenience of finding a therapist via telehealth. But unfortunately, what I learned from talking to hundreds of users while I was building this app was, it just wasn't meeting their needs. There were so many people that were dissatisfied, who were not just because it lacked the human element of talking to a therapist, but when they finally did get on a video session with their therapist, there were provider incompatibility issues. They felt like they weren't making progress because it was so one size fits all. And many of them were dropping out of treatment prematurely. So this is a really long-winded way of saying that essentially we saw a gap in the market, and the problems that I was hearing from these users were also problems that I had felt very personally in my life growing up, my upbringing, my experiences in college. And so I decided with my co-founder, if no one else is building a solution that is more personalized for people of color, that is actually tailoring the care model, not just matching people of color to clinicians of color and calling it a day. I think that was something that we really wanted to build and innovate on. And so that's what we're doing at Anise. We're like I said, culturally responsive digital platform for the Asian American community more broadly. So including South Asians, but also East Asians, Southeast Asians, et cetera. And what we are really innovating on, like I said, is the care model itself. There's actually a lot of studies out there that show a very limited correlation between ethnic matching and outcomes. So just because you're a South Asian looking for therapy doesn't mean a South Asian therapist is definitely going to be the right fit for you. It's exactly what Vidya mentioned, which is that cultural humility piece is so important. And how do you actually ensure that any therapist is equipped with that cultural humility? A lot of it is in the training, and a lot of it is also in the intervention itself and making sure it's adapted to identify accurately what might be going on with someone through more tailored assessments. Then from there, making sure the clinicians are equipped with the right sets of tools to, on an ongoing basis, understand how to really personalize the treatment plan to the individual client's needs. And then lastly, we curate a pretty wide library of resources that are very tailored for the cultural stressors that we've observed in our research to be common amongst South Asians and Asians more broadly.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It sounds very robust and very much needed in our community as well. In terms of when you're in your experience of building the platform of Anise, what challenges did you face, and specifically reaching the audiences that your platform is trying to target? Any specific challenges that you found that Anise is trying to address?
Yeah, a lot of challenges.
Like the technical side of things,
yeah. A couple come to mind. One is on the actual reaching the client side of the world. It's not easy when there is so much stigma in the community, right? Like there is a good chunk of people who are potentially in their young adulthood who have started to, especially like Vidya said, with the pandemic, things have started to normalize a little bit more. Demand has started to grow. There are definitely some tailwinds, but amongst older populations and even people like me who grew up with all this stigma, there is this hesitation to seek support. So it's not just enough for us to be a treatment platform and say come seek support. There's a lot of psychoeducation work that we need to do up front to even get people comfortable with this notion of what is my mental health? How do I get started with seeking support? How do I navigate this really complex system? And what's the difference between a therapist and a psychologist and a psychiatrist and a coach? It's all very confusing, and it's hard to reach this audience and acquire these customers when there's so much of that like limited awareness and stigma to break down. So that is like the first step, and there's a long tail to that. So once we hopefully play a role in breaking down some of that, we will see more people willing to sign up for support, because I truly think almost anyone can benefit from just talking to someone, no matter how big or small your needs are. On the provider side, I would say part of the difficulty, which is why we've taken the approach that we've taken, is there's not a ton of Asian American therapists out there, or Asian American providers, right? So, you know, a lot of people think that just finding an Asian American therapist is going to solve all of their struggles. But like as a business, that isn't necessarily scalable for us, because there aren't that many out there. So to reach that audience, or to reach the right audience, we're taking a different approach to like recruitment, where we are really focused on the training piece, so that we can really recruit any therapist of any background. And if we put them through our training that is being developed by the experts in the space, people who have done 20+ years of research in what it means to deliver culturally sensitive care to the Asian American population, then we can start to recruit more easily and have a wider range of therapists available on our platform who actually have capacity, because as you know, it's pretty hard to find someone who has availability these days. So that's another struggle that we initially faced, that we've found this workaround for, and have also even found a really interesting which is through basically like the training programs that younger therapists are going through as part of their like graduation requirements, right? They have to do their clinical hours, and we can serve as a training site and a supervision site for these therapists who are really, really smart, but also willing and interested, because they are younger, in this notion of learning what culturally responsive care delivery means.
Amazing. In terms of, for Anis, if there are consumers or providers that might be interested in learning more about your platform, maybe they're looking for a therapist, can you tell us about where you are in the process, where you've launched, and what that onboarding process would look like for them, and where they can get more information?
Yes, so we are currently live in California. As you all probably know, there are like state licensure laws, so we're launching kind of one state at a time. So we're live in California. We are currently self-pay, so it's a subscription, but we are really excited to share that we are going to start accepting insurance in the next couple months. So really great progress on that front. But for now, if you're interested in signing up, you can go to our website, which is www.anishealth.co. And on there, if you click the Get Started button, there's an intake form that's pretty short, should just take you 5 minutes. Asks some dimensions to your like demographic information and cultural identity, asks a little bit about your previous experience with therapy, and then your preferences for a provider. And based on that, within less than 2 business days, we'd be able to get you matched to the right recommended providers, and you can get started by doing a free trial consultation. If you don't live in California, we are launching in New York in just a couple of weeks, which is something we're also very excited about. So if you live in New York, we recommend just signing up for our email distribution list, so that you're the first to know when we're live, and then you'll have early access to the platform to sign up. So yeah, that's where we're live. Hopefully we'll be expanding to more states soon. Vidya, when we expand to Florida, we should definitely get in touch. And in the interim, if you don't live in either of those states, we do a lot of community programming as well. We do webinars and workshops with employee resource groups, and we do like panels and things like this. So if you do work at a company that like maybe you're the ERG lead, or you want to bring us in, that is something we've done in the past, and that serves as a really great place for people to eventually join our platform. So those are some of the things. Follow us on social media.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Nisha. I'm really inspired by everything you're doing with Anisa. Sounds like it will be really valuable to the community, and wish you all the best and as you expand in different states.
Thank you.
And our final panelist for this evening will be Mrinal Gokhale. Mrinal, as mentioned earlier, is the author of Mental Health Advocate and author of Saya Unveiled, South Asian Mental Health Spotlighted. Mrinal, can you tell us a little bit about your book, Saya Unveiled, and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. So my book is a collection of 11 true stories of that relate to South Asian mental health. So what I did for it is I basically, when I was planning for the book, what I did is I did a Google search on South Asian mental health, found these organizations that popped up, and I said, hey, I'm writing a book. Can you put out some submission calls for me on your social media for people who want to tell their stories? And then I had people reach out to me. And then what I did is I interviewed each interested party, and then I wrote their story in third person. So the issues tackled in the book are things like stigma and how maybe people went about overcoming them within their family or community, different treatments for different mental health related challenges, and kind of the history behind it in a sense. And basically the goal of the book is number one, to be able to give other South Asians struggling with mental health something to relate to, and then hopefully also even in the elder generations promote that intergenerational education and healing by teaching those who don't know much about psychology and mental health, like giving them that starting point within the South Asian realm.
Wonderful. I was able to read, I know we had talked before, but I was able to read some of the stories, and I was just in awe, like with your writing and the way that you describe their experiences. I think it really can, anyone that's interested in reading it, it can really be relatable in a lot of these experiences, especially as like first, second generation and navigating identities and the stigma. And Mrinal, in terms of your the book, so the characters that you featured in your book, the real people, what were some of the biggest challenges or barriers that they experienced with mental health as they were on their journey and mental health journey?
I would say that probably things like anxiety and depression are the most common issues that came about. However, you might, I think that a pattern that I observed is things like academic pressure or job pressure being a source of it. And I think that originates a lot from model minority myth. If I had to define model minority myth in a nutshell, I would say it's the false ideology that certain groups of people are unequivocally and effortlessly successful, and stereotypes that come as a result of it, such as all Asians are smart, all Chinese people are math whizzes, all Indians are doctors, that kind of thing. And you will see when you read the book repeating patterns of things like people struggling and not speaking up at first, trying to speak up, and then families kind of not taking it seriously until it gets to a really serious, either life-threatening or to a point where it's really interfering badly with their daily functioning. And I think that comes back to people, I think the stigma resulting from people in South Asian communities, at least, not really seeing mental health as a spectrum that everyone is on and that everybody has and everyone will have at some point in life, and rather just associating it with things like suicidality or psychosis. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that's another thing that my book will help to normalize.
Absolutely. And I know you're a writer, and some of your work also includes, you're writing your second book, which is amazing. You've also written some interesting articles about what you're talking about, model minority myth and neurodivergent South Asians. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience in writing, and what that's like, that's been as a South Asian writer?
So what has been my experience with writing about those things?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that so basically my journey with therapy started at the age of 20 as a college student, which I think is relatable to a lot of people in, in our community. And until then, I never knew any other South Asians in therapy until I wrote my book. And then 5 years after, starting therapy in college, I went back to therapy. The first time I went for therapy, it was to get treated for really severe social anxiety, and it was helpful. But I think that years later, I struggled in a way that I couldn't quite put my finger on when it came to interpersonal stuff, and then I went back to therapy at 25, and then that therapist said that she believes that I am on the spectrum. And then as she taught me more about it, I started to agree with it. And then it made sense to not just for that reason, but because because that's something that runs in my family as well. And then from then, my writing just kind of took right off from then. I started a blog, which I'm not doing anymore. And then from there, I started to look for ways and outlets to promote my blog. So then I found outlets such as Attitude Magazine, now Brown Girl Magazine, Neuroclastic, and that is somewhere that I write about it. And as I started noticing that not a lot of people in our community talk about it, I slowly started getting messages the more I wrote, like through my email saying, hey, I'm Indian and I have such and such, or I'm neurodivergent too, thanks for writing this and that.
Absolutely. And in terms of for those that might, like yourself, be passionate about this topic and have a personal experience that they want to share, but they might be hesitant in how to navigate that, or they want to do some advocacy work or help to reduce stigma, what would you say to those folks, and how would you encourage them to create more open dialogue about specific the intersectionalities within even just the South Asian mental health and the identities? How would you encourage them to seek out advocating about the topic or opening up about it?
I feel like that's kind of going to look different for every person and where they're at in their journey. But I think that a cut and dry answer that I can come up with offhand is that we need to keep on having these uncomfortable conversations. And how that's going to be approached, whether it's writing your own story or somebody else's story or a combination of both, and where you're going to talk about it is kind of something that's dependent per person and what they're comfortable with.
Definitely. I think it's encouraging, inspiring that I think the more that we talk about uncomfortable conversations, and others will also feel comfortable to talk about their journey, depending on in any capacity, right? Or even just attending these types of events and supporting our panelists, or just being a part of the conversation, encouraging their friends to join, encouraging family members, talking about it at home. So definitely very inspiring that what you've done in your journey.
And I'll also add that this proves another case for why there should be more South Asian and POC therapists in the field. Like, it won't solve everything, obviously, but I think that just for people to see that there's people who look like them, who speak the same language as them, who practice the same religious and cultural norms as them, working in the field and working with the DSM-5 and, providing diagnostics and talk therapy and medication, I think is one step to make people feel at least more comfortable to admitting that they might be struggling, even if their solution or treatment, so to speak, may not be cut and dry.
Well, we'd love to hear some excerpts from your book, if you feel comfortable, insights and excerpts from your book, so our attendees can hear a little bit from your book, if you're okay with that.
Sure. Sorry, you're breaking up. Hold on, let me wait till it stabilizes a bit. Okay, so there have been 2 panels where I've read from book number 1, and I was a little on edge about whether I should do that or book number 2 because it's not quite out yet. However, it'll be out in July. So I guess I think that, however, I think that maybe it might make sense to do book number 2 since it is reading it out loud is a bit new to me. So let me just say that this one is not out yet, but book number 1 is. So, and that will be in July. So, there's no further questions or anything. I can pull up the thing and start to read from it.
Yeah, go ahead, and then
Okay.
we'll have time for some questions after your readings as well.
Okay, so you're ready.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So book number 2 is going to be a collection, again, just like book number 1, of different people's, South Asian people's mental health related stories and journeys, and they will be written in third person again. So basically, I am going to read one page then from one of the stories from my second upcoming book. So the title of this one is called Reclaiming Home. It was the fall of 2020. Sarah Ahmed was feeling hot and engorged from breastfeeding as she anxiously paced inside her mother's bedroom during a virtual court session. Sarah lives in a humid state down south where it's normal to have on air conditioning year-round and to see people walk around in bathing suits. Her home environments were also fiery, both as a child and then as a wife and mom. The last thing she needed in life was more heat. But unfortunately, Sarah was in for the fight of her life just a few months after having a second baby. I was just trying to keep calm and healthy for my third trimester through postpartum recovery in the midst of getting a divorce, but my ex kept on bringing up legal obstacles that made me feel harassed, she said. Sarah's estranged husband, Mark, had been seeking joint custody of their infant son and toddler daughter. For almost a year, he'd accused Sarah of keeping him from both kids. He and his lawyer had used various legal methods to raise the matter. A month after the first custodial hearing, Mark, who is a white American man, told the judge that Sarah, who's a Pakistani American woman, was not obeying court orders. In turn, he was told to hire a guardian ad litem. Once he did so, Sarah recruited close family and friends, all people of color who were in her life throughout her marriage and pregnancies. These people would talk with the guardian ad litem about what they saw in Sarah's marriage and how they viewed her parenting skills. She could trust they would have her back, but she could not trust that their accounts would be taken seriously. You know, that guardian ad litem was really weird, one friend told Sarah. She asked whether your mom does all the work with the kids because you live together and if she's overbearing and very religious. All of Sarah's interviewed friends and relatives reported similar encounters. They were questioned about Sarah's culture and religion, why she co-sleeps, even when they said it's normal for Pakistani culture. She didn't understand how the questions related to her capability as a mom, but it was clear that the court-appointed representative had many implicit biases. Mark had told the guardian ad litem that Sarah's parents forced him to convert to Islam after marrying her, insinuating that she had a violent Muslim family. Upon hearing the accusation, Sarah became increasingly anxious and dreaded the day that the guardian ad litem would announce a decision. And I know you want more, but I'm going to stop here.
Amazing. I think that, that was very, very deep in the experience that a mother go through and the complexities of that. And I think it really sheds light on how much, we really don't know what people are going through, especially within the South Asian, the complexities and the nuances of what's happening in these various stages of life and these transitions. So thank you for sharing. And where, if people would like to read your book, where can they purchase and read your book?
It's on Amazon. Again, book number 1 is, book number 2 will be 2. And also I can ship it to you personally if you're in the US for $1 less and sign.
Wonderful. So we'll be sharing that information as well. And I think, Nishat, we have some resources as well, right, that we'll be providing all the attendees this evening. So thank you so much for our wonderful panelists. I think each of you are doing some amazing work in your individual respective fields and breaking stigma and helping create change and, you know, speaking up, being authentic, writing, providing therapy, creating entire platforms, which is really inspiring. And I hope that this, you know, inspires all of you to, you know, get more involved in advocating for South Asian health, specifically South Asian mental health. And we're all here to help you, and we'll be sharing our contact information as well if you're interested in connecting. I'll be opening up the rest of the panel discussion to the questions in the chat. So just give me a second as I So just some comments. Unfortunately, I've had a hard time being understood by the South Asian providers I've seen as well, if not more, agree with the piece about cultural humility. I find it harder to connect to other South Asian therapists as a client and a fellow therapist. At least I feel a bit better that I'm not alone. Hearing that part about outcomes is validating. I appreciate the conversation about the discomfort South Asians can feel when looking to speak to someone due to stigma around therapy and mental health. It's so validating. A lot of everyone wants to read your book, Mrinal. We're really excited to get your hands on a copy. We have a question here. First off, thank you for sharing experiences. I love hearing it. The question is, have you seen a shift post-pandemic in the acceptance and openness in the South Asian community surrounding these mental health conversations?
Is that open to answer?
Yeah, it looks like it's open to anyone that would like to answer that.
Okay, I'll go first if no one else wants to right now. So short answer is yes. So I wrote my book in 2021, and up until that point, I never knew a single Indian or South Asian that also went to therapy, just like myself, also struggled with mental health or was diagnosed neurodivergent, just like myself. And when I started the book, I was afraid that I wouldn't find anybody willing to tell their stories. But and then shockingly, I was overwhelmed at just how much information was out there with a simple hashtag South Asian mental health in Instagram, or just South Asian mental health in the Google search bar, and all these organizations that popped up. And I think that I feel as though it was kind of brewing up for a while, is my guess, but then the pandemic and all the mental health declines that it brought across all communities is kind of what pushed people, I think, in marginalized communities, including ours, to take that next step and start being more open, is my guess.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that feedback. It looks like we have a comment. Again, the guys are coming in quickly now. As a therapist myself, I'm wondering how you are successfully reaching potential South Asian clients. Anjali, is this for a specific panelist?
No, anybody in particular, but particularly therapists as well. Just wondering how you're marketing to them, or even what you may have tried that didn't work so well.
Would you like to answer that, Vidya?
I haven't personally marketed just to the South Asian community. I'm very open about the languages that I speak. I can speak and read and write 2 Indian languages fluently, and I can understand 2 other languages, including Urdu, which is, from Pakistan. So, and I talk about that in my bio, and I don't market myself to the communities as such, but I do get a lot of clients within the community. But the challenge that I'm seeing here is, as a therapist, I have to be really honest. It's what Nisha was talking about. I could speak the language, but I might not be a good fit, because just because I'm a South Asian doesn't mean that I'm going to be a good fit for another South Asian. So I understand my limitations, but that's just how I market. I just present in bio where I'm from, what I do, and my just piece of cultural identity.
Yeah, I was also gonna add that one thing that's worked really well for us is trying to establish partnerships with some community organizations that exist. You asked, you know, what's one thing that didn't work well? Well, when we tried doing just like ads, like that didn't work well because a lot of South Asians don't trust ads when it comes to their mental health. They, you know, want to hear from a trusted resource or word of mouth referrals. So some examples that I would recommend, there are like a lot of nonprofits and groups on social media that have directories that you can join as a therapist, and they're like curated directories that do yield really great kind of flow of clients. So I think some of them will be on that resource sheet that Nishat's going to send out afterwards, but a couple are like Asian Mental Health Collective and Asian Spur Mental Health. They have like directories and resources for the Asian population more broadly. But within that, there are a lot of really great South Asian therapists as well. So that's another avenue that you can try plugging into.
There's a question here. What gaps in clinical research do you see in your work? It looks like that's also a general question for anybody.
I'm happy to share one stat that always blows my mind. But the number of the existing kind of intervention standard of care that's been developed is so skewed towards the Western world and like the white man's view of psychology. That interestingly, the current like clinical trial data that informed all of the psychiatric interventions or psychological interventions that exist today is based off of less than 7% BIPOC individuals. So that's kind of crazy to me, and only less than 0.1% of that is Asian people. So as you can imagine, it's kind of hard to believe that the current standard of care was built for people like us when the data that went into informing those interventions is so skewed towards just, you know, a certain population. And I think a lot of the research that that exists out there just isn't informed by us. So I think it's really important. Mrinal kind of brought this up, like, while the answer to all of our problems isn't just having more South Asian therapists out there, it definitely does help to diversify the pool of providers as well as, you know, clients that are actually seeking support and being included in the research so that the interventions themselves can reflect our problems, our struggles, and our values as well.
There's a question for Vidya. So I'm a third-year doctoral student for clinical psych. I'm really interested to know which evidence-based practices have worked for you thus far working with South Asian adolescents.
Again, it's a very you know, subjective term. I have been successful using EMDR for a lot of trauma, and that's the trauma work that I believe in, and also some heavy CBT, DBT, and all of that. That being said, you can look at DSM-5 and even for bipolar or BDD or anything, any of that, right? Or ODD, sorry. And you're looking at it going, oh, this doesn't just match up. But when you have the cultural perspective and you look at the client based on that, you might see certain traits that appear, which is why it's so important to have your cultural lens on when you look at any evidence-based practice or DSM. And I think my honest response to that would be take anything that works with a typical client and then add a little bit of culture to it. And then think from your perspective as a clinician. Does that make sense? How does it feel when you present it to the client? And just, you have to test the water, because unfortunately, we don't have any evidence-based practices right now, at least where we live.
Just trying to read through. Okay, one question that I have is, how would you suggest to bring up the topic of feeling anxiety and also not feeling as seen or heard in the South Asian community to immigrant parents? What is something that you would suggest to immigrant parents to be more open to hearing about mental health? I think that's also a general question. Anyone that would like to answer?
To me, this goes back to if you were mainly born and raised in a South Asian country, you don't understand how you don't understand what these labels mean and how they manifest outside of a stereotypical way. And I think, which is the biggest challenge, again, coming back to not seeing mental health as kind of a spectrum. And I think that from my non-clinical opinion, I think that what could possibly help is if we if we teach people what can happen when high functioning or mild anxiety or perhaps even depression goes untreated for a long time. How we go about doing that, the specifics, I'm not completely sure about.
And then one final question we have, it looks like this question is from Ronald. All the powerful stories you share in your amazing book, what was the requirement process for the recruitment? More specifically, did these people already have a previous diagnosis?
So what I did is when I reached out to the nonprofits and made them put out submission calls, if people were interested, what I would do is I would have them fill out a form, like a basic questionnaire and a consent form. The questionnaire would ask, very demographical questions such as name, birth date, gender, sexual identity, a religion that you grew up under, ethnicity, and then I would say, what have you been diagnosed with? What makes your mental health journey unique? And what's it like talking about mental health as a South Asian person? And then I would evaluate from there. And then with just about everyone who submitted a form, I would just try to have a casual chat with them on video to get to know them a little bit better and then decide from there. And I think that initially it kind of threw me off when people would come back saying things like, I've never been to therapy or been to a hospital or taken medication or even been formally diagnosed with anything. But then I was like, no, I don't want to exclude them completely because it's still important for people. I think this could teach people that healing and discovering the self isn't a one size fits all, in that things like the Western treatments for mental health may work for some, but not for others, and vice versa. So I think that even if people didn't have a diagnosis on the record, they could still speak to things such as trauma, loss, things like divorce that for sure impact your mental health, regardless to whether or not you're formally diagnosed or treated.
Awesome. It looks like I got all the questions. I missed any, I'm just thinking a little. But yeah, okay, thank you so much everyone for joining this evening. I know that this was really powerful, and I hope you guys had some insights and feel inspired. Nishad, did you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you everyone so much for joining. I feel so validated after this conversation, and it was such a powerful conversation to hear from all the panelists and Neha, you as well. But to wrap up this wonderful event, thank you all for being a part of this important conversation on mental health. And a big thank you to our amazing panelists for their openness and contributions. And to all who joined, thank you so much for joining and showing your commitment to mental health awareness. That's always really important too. So we'll be following up with some helpful mental health resources as well as contact information for Neha and all the panelists if you'd like to get in touch. And feel free to reach out to Brown Girls Health with any questions. And we're really excited to host more of these community chats. But thank you so much all for joining, and have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Nishad. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.